I mean, the biggest coward in the UK is Keir Starmer. I never expected people to be so cowardly. I never expected people to be so thick.
Graham Linehan just went on live TV and unleashed a brutal, no-holds-barred attack on Keir Starmer that instantly shook the political landscape. This wasn't a polite disagreement. It was a direct accusation of cowardice, failure, and total political avoidance at the highest level, and the timing couldn't be worse for Starmer, already under pressure, making this clash feel less like commentary and more like a warning shot.
He said, when he was running for Prime Minister, he said he would bring an end to the culture wars. And instead, it's people like Sandy Peggy who have to fight them. It's people like the Darlington nurses. It's people like women in prison, while he hides from the debate.
Linehan doesn't just criticize Keir Starmer. He dismantles the image Starmer carefully built over years. He argues that when the pressure intensified, when institutions like the NHS, schools, and public bodies were forced to take positions on deeply divisive gender policies, Starmer didn't lead, he disappeared into ambiguity. Instead of drawing clear lines or defending a coherent stance, Linhan claims Starmer defaulted to vague, lawyer-like answers that satisfied no one while avoiding real accountability. In a moment that demanded clarity, he suggests Starmer chose calculation over conviction, leaving a leadership vacuum at the very top.
And I've never heard him make a convincing argument as to why these men should be allowed in these spaces, as to why children should be taken to gender clinics and mutilated and sterilized. And people, you know, I used to get into trouble for using language like that, but it is accurate language, you know?
And Linehan pushes it further. This isn't just about silence, it's about consequences. He argues that while political leaders stayed cautious, ordinary people paid the price. Professionals dragged into tribunals, women facing workplace conflicts, and public debate becoming increasingly hostile and polarized. In his framing, Starmer didn't just avoid the fight, he allowed it to escalate unchecked. That's the core of the attack. Not that Starmer picked the wrong side, but that he refused to decisively pick any side at all, turning what should have been leadership into what critics see as strategic absence.
Comedian Graham Linehan has lashed out at UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer for being a weak leader. Now, he was arrested at Heathrow Airport last week for the tweets that he posted on X, and he told Megyn Kelly that he can no longer relax while he's in the UK, and he's always kind of looking over his shoulder.
That is not leadership. That is management of optics, and Linehan said it out loud in front of the whole country.
And these men have the police wrapped around their fingers. Not just me who's been arrested. There's been, several dozens of women arrested in the UK over the last 8 years. And again, these women are suffering in silence because no one with any authority will stand up to them. You know, Keir Starmer came into power saying that he would end the culture wars, but he hasn't. He's just hid from them.
What's driving this backlash isn't just one interview or one controversy, it's a pattern. Critics argue that Keir Starmer has repeatedly relied on cautious, risk-averse tactics that prioritize short-term political safety over clear leadership. Whether it's shifting positions, delayed responses, or avoiding direct answers on contentious issues, the perception building among opponents is that he manages crises rather than confronts them.
What do you think of him?
Terrible. Arrogant, self-entitled, and in my opinion, typical Tory.
Oh yeah, this toad. I retract my previous statement of withholding any severe judgment for people.
There's some people that like him, but I'm not one of them.
And over time, that approach starts to erode trust. Because in politics, hesitation doesn't just look like caution, it starts to look like weakness. That's the space where frustration grows, where critics become louder, and where figures like Graham Linehan feel emboldened to say on live television what others believe but won't publicly state.
Someone like the head of Mermaids took her child to be castrated in Thailand when he was 16 years old, and they were in the air when he was 15. You know, that's how eager she was to get the job done. These people are evil, and they need to be stopped.
What makes the attack land even harder is that Keir Starmer is already bleeding. Separate from anything Graham Linehan said, the Prime Minister is in the middle of a serious trust crisis over allegations surrounding Peter Mandelson's vetting process. The core question is simple: what did Starmer know, and when did he know it? His team says they were unaware of concerns until later, but critics, including journalist David Maddox, claim Downing Street was warned months earlier. That is a direct contradiction.
What do you think of him?
Terrible.
Why is he terrible?
He's got no policies that are interesting to people. Yesterday, they've asked him to resign yesterday.
I feel like he's in an impossible position. I feel like nobody at the top can keep everybody happy. I feel like, and he's made some terrible decisions, obviously.
And when Labour moved to block an independent investigation into the handling of this, the situation went from bad to dangerous. If there is nothing to hide, you do not block scrutiny. The public understands that. Every voter who watched a government behave that way understands exactly what it looks like.
Which he is most certainly feeling the repercussions of at the moment. But, I pity anyone in that position because it's not an easy one.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not one I would want to be in. So therefore I kind of withhold any severe judgment.
The Boris Johnson comparison is instructive. When Johnson faced investigation, the process was allowed to move forward. You can argue about the results. You can argue about the politics, but the process ran. Critics are now saying Labour, the party that promised higher standards, the party that made accountability its entire pitch, did the opposite when the heat came near their own leader. That inconsistency does not stay hidden. It feeds the exact narrative Linehan is pushing, that Starmer says one thing and does another.
On his travels abroad again to discuss the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, while back at home, leadership rivals are preparing to declare war on his premiership. Sir Keir Starmer is attending a summit with European leaders in Armenia at the start of a week that will determine whether he survives as Prime Minister or for how long.
While all of this is happening at home, Starmer is abroad. He's doing the statesman routine. Ukraine, the Middle East, global security conferences. The images look impressive on the surface, a world leader at the table. But back in Britain, Labour MPs are nervous. Leadership whispers are louder than they have been in months, and the phrase Starmageddon is being used to describe what could happen if the upcoming local elections produce a devastating result. Bad results in England, Scotland, and Wales could trigger something uncomfortable inside a party that thought it had more time.
Come the end of next week, or maybe he might survive for a few weeks after, but there's going to be a constitutional shock on these Isles next Thursday.
Labour's leadership crisis could come to a head this week, with MPs claiming potential leadership candidates will face a put-up or shut-up moment after Thursday's local, Scottish and Welsh elections.
A cabinet minister said recently that now is not the time for a leadership contest. Not Starmer is safe. Not we are fully behind our leader. Now is not the time. That is the language of a party calculating a window, not defending a man. Once that kind of language enters the room, the ground has already moved. The names being spoken in corridors include Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, Andy Burnham, Ed Miliband, Al Carnes. The moment a sitting leader's potential replacements become a regular part of the political conversation, that leader is already weakened, whether they know it or not.
They're simply a way of brute forcing the idea that some men or women into the public consciousness, and I'm astonished that it worked. I'm astonished that you have people like I'm astonished that the NHS is not only defending putting men in women's spaces, but forcing the women who have to be subjected to it to tribunals and so on,
Linehan did not just embarrass Starmer with one insult. He exposed the gap between the way Starmer presents himself and the way he actually operates under pressure. Courage is easy to claim. It is expensive to demonstrate. When Linehan stood in that studio, legally vindicated, professionally destroyed, and completely unafraid, He represented everything Starmer's critics say the Prime Minister is not.
But now I'm in the States. I've escaped them all. I'm away from all the politics, all the, there's a lot of different drama that goes on in this space, understandably, because it's full of people who simply won't be told. Bolshy women who fought this with every sinew, and it can be kind of dramatic sometimes. So I'm glad. My aim now is to withdraw myself from the debate to some extent and concentrate on writing comedy again.
This is the man who created Father Ted, BAFTA winner, Emmy winner, one of the most celebrated comedy writers in British and Irish television history. The liberal creative establishment used to love this man. They celebrated him, promoted him, and invited him to their parties. Then he started asking questions about gender ideology, and those same people didn't just disagree with him, they destroyed him. The legal system gave Graham Linehan back his voice, and he didn't waste a second of it. What he said didn't just spark another headline, it poured fuel on a fire already burning beneath a government struggling to explain itself, struggling to defend its credibility, and struggling to answer even the simplest questions with clarity.
There's a thing in script writing called show don't tell. Keir Starmer is a master of tell don't show. His party will say anything, because they've already proved they can say anything. When people like David Lammy get on screen and say that men can grow a cervix, So it really is in the actions, and the only action they need to do to get a little bit closer to the centre is apologise to Rosie Duffield. She has received incredible abuse. So I don't like him. I'll never vote for him. I don't trust him.
You watched a man come back from the edge of total professional destruction and, on his first major platform, refuse to soften a single word. No hesitation, no calculation. He aimed straight at Keir Starmer and pulled the trigger in full view of the public. Agree with him or not, moments like that don't fade. They stick. So if this is what serious leadership is supposed to look like, why does it take a canceled comedian to say what the Prime Minister won't?